descansando momentáneamente. Once again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We will be beginning shortly. Gracias por acompañarnos esta tarde o a esta hora. Comenzaremos pronto. Thank you all for being here today. Gracias a todos por estar aquí. This session will be interpreted English to Spanish, and Juanita will be guiding us through our interpretation instructions. Esta charla se hará en inglés y español, y Juanita nos apoyará en entender las instrucciones para esto.
Thank you very much, Marina. This meeting will be simultaneously interpreted. Please select English or Spanish on the globe that will appear on the bottom of your screen, and then select or click Mute Original Audio at the globe as well. If you're with us from your cell phone, please remember to look for those 3 dots and touch the dots to select your language. Thank you very much. Esta reunión será interpretada simultáneamente. Por favor, seleccione su idioma cuando aparezca el globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla, ya sea inglés o español, y después pulse silenciar audio original o mute original audio, también en el globo. Desde su celular o tableta, por favor, toque los 3 puntos y oprima interpretación. Muchas gracias. Today, we are happy to share that language justice will be practiced during the event. We will honor and make room for people to participate in the language they most feel comfortable in, which means simultaneous interpretation will be offered Spanish and English so that everyone may listen, speak, and connect fully. Nos complace compartir esta noche, o esta tarde, perdón, que en este evento se practicará la justicia lingüística. Honraremos y ofreceremos espacio para que las personas participen en el idioma con el que se sientan más cómodos, lo que significa que se ofrecerá interpretación simultánea en español y en inglés para que todos puedan escuchar, hablar y conectarse plenamente. Ya recibieron sus instrucciones, por favor, sigan también, si necesitan, lo que aparece en la pantalla actualmente. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Marina.
Thank you, Juanita. And as a reminder, to receive the full benefits of interpretation, we encourage you to sign in through Zoom or to register through Zoom. Y como un recordatorio para recibir los beneficios completos de la interpretación, le invitamos a que se inscriban a través de Zoom. Ok, gracias, Erika, por apoyarnos. Hello, I am Marina Rodriguez, your moderator, alongside Lucy, Lucy Recio, who will have a moment to introduce herself very shortly. If you're tuning in for the first time, I am an education mentor coach at Olarkin who's worked in affinity with family childcare programs for the past 15 years and have been in the early care and education sector for 3 decades, entering this world as a young Head Start parent. Today, we have the good fortune to share this moment with whom I consider really powerful women. My Dominican nibblings would call you bacanas. My Mexican nibblings would say or call you fajonas. This is someone with grit, gravitas, and intentionality. thank you for being here today. And thank you for everything you've done to elevate and honor the family childcare sector. Joining us today, we have the co-founder of All Our Kin, Jessica Sager, Erica Phillips, the executive director at the National Association for Family Childcare, and Sarah Haberberger, founding executive director at Greenlight Fund in Kansas City. And the cherry on top, I'm delighted to co-moderate with a new friend life has gifted me, Lucy Recio, founder of Third Bloom Consulting. Thank you all for being here today. Indeed, we are in good company. My hope is that you were able to tune in to our previous sessions. If you haven't, I invite you to listen in. You can find the recordings on All Our Kin and the Trust for Learning social media platforms. The conversations have been insightful, motivating, and inspiring. We've spent time with coaches, the ones who walk alongside, listen deeply, hold, accompany, and believe as you in the brilliance of family childcare. We've heard the stories of home-based educators navigating systems, culture, care, and trust. And a few organic themes that have come through that I'd like to share with you. One of those is the role the parallel process plays in lasting change. The messiness in co-creating programs that are relational in nature, and how imperative it is to see it through, because it is the special ingredient in transformation. And the need for cultural shifts that witness children in their full capacities. And the thread weaving all of our conversations, the power of coaching in family childcare. Today, we have the opportunity to turn it towards systems, towards policies, funding flows, or the lack of them, and frameworks that shape what is possible. Because coaching cannot be sustained by passion alone, because brilliance burns out when it's not resourced. Because family childcare is so often the first and most trusted care option in community, deserves more than piecemeal support. This session is an invitation to reimagine what's possible, to be honest about what isn't working, and to take seriously the power of aligned dignity-driven systems to transform, not just tweak, the conditions for family childcare educators and those of us who support them. I'm going to turn it over to Lucy, who will share a few words about her and invite our panelists to share their stories and wisdoms with us. Lucy, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina, for such a beautiful welcome and for setting the container for the conversation that we are going to have today. I also want to express deep gratitude for all of you who have taken time to join us today. It is incredible to see how many individuals are joining us live for this impactful conversation. As Marina shared, my name is Lucy Recio. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I am joining you all from Washington, D.C., the ancestral lands of the Piscataway people. And I am excited to be in this conversation with, as Marina shared, dynamic women who are leading and charting the way around how to support, how to create systems, and how to really be in community and in solidarity with members of the family child care workforce. This is work that we know brings us so much joy and also at times can feel really disheartening. There are moments where the work feels incredibly overwhelming or as if we are pulling at a thread that is not giving way. And yet we persist, we resist, and we remain steadfast in doing this work. We also recognize that part of what keeps us motivated in doing that work are the things that bring us into this space. Perhaps it's an identity, perhaps it's a relationship, perhaps it is something that has that is unspoken, that really encourages us to remain, as I said, steadfast in this work. And so I would love to actually take a moment. We all can access everyone's bio and their prolific careers, but I want to actually start us off with something that is a bit unspoken. I love for Jess, Erica, and Sarah for each of you to share a bit about what are the things that are not obvious about you that inform how you show up into this work. Specifically, what are the passions or perhaps identities, those things that are not easily accessible and discernible, that bring you and encourage you as you do the work that you do every single day on behalf of family child care providers. Just, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, this is such a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked it on a panel before. My first identity was sister. That was who I was first and foremost. I had a brother who had a host of physical and mental and emotional challenges, and I spent a lot of my childhood as his advocate and as his champion. And I saw the ways in which the world did not welcome him and just how much fighting it took to get systems or caregivers to embrace him. And when I grew up, I wanted to fight for kids like my brother. And when I met family childcare educators, boy, oh boy, I have seen the extraordinary care and dedication that caregivers give day after day to all kids, including kids like my brother. I am in awe of what they do. And truly, it feels like my life's work and my mission is to support those caregivers so that children like my brother can have what they need.
Thank you so much for that, Jess. And thank you so much also for bringing into space a contour of your identity that perhaps many did not know. Erica, what about you? What is something that you would like to share with everyone here about yourself that is not easily discernible or identifiable, yet informs and impacts how you show up in your work every single day?
Thank you, Lucy, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone here. Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to share the virtual space with all of the other panelists. And as I'm looking at the participant list and seeing all the names, I see so many familiar names. It's like a family in our space right now, which does connect with that identity to build off of what Jessica was saying. One of my identities that I often go to is granddaughter. And one thing that people may or may not know about me is that my parents literally grew up on the same street, the same block in South Philadelphia. And at the center of that block was my grandma B's house. And she cared for all the children, my cousins, other friends and family in our little block, and educated us, provided food, affirming spaces in a city that was otherwise not very conducive and supportive for children that look like me and my family in South Philadelphia. However, as we grew up, we got messages that were very clear that what my grandmother was preparing was sharing with us wasn't high quality, that wasn't where children should be. And it always stuck with me that if the city and other organizations would have actually worked with my grandmother and provided access and resources and support, that would have been one solution, one way of supporting families like mine and communities. But instead, she eventually, like many others, had to close. She became the beloved lunch lady at our local, at the school, but it stuck with me. And I have been working in family child care now for about 15 years, really with this idea that as a community, we already have the answers, we have the solutions. We just need the recognition and the respect. And so how it shows up in this work is deep respect for family childcare educators, for families. And I don't buy that there's this trade-off between quality and what families want. It is one in of themselves. They are the same. And the second piece that it informs how I show up is the real stakes behind the work that we're doing. That this really could make a difference between somebody being able to buy their home or not having access to housing, or whether it's nutrition in the childcare program. And so the conversations and the decisions that are being made have real impacts on family childcare educators as well as families too. And I've seen and experienced that from multiple different sides.
I appreciate that, Erica, and I appreciate this interweaving, right, of the personal and the professional, which I think is so ever present for many of us. Sarah, I'd love to hear your response to the question.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone on the panel, for letting me join you today. It is an honor to be with all of you. So I think the identities that come up for me are much like Erica. My grandmother provided care for me and many other folks on my street growing up, and I was a beneficiary of great love and education and warmth, and learned so much in those spaces in ways that weren't valued then, but I hope are valued more now. But now, as a parent of twins, when they were newborns and I was navigating the childcare space, which is a scary endeavor with one child, but with two, it is really nerve-wracking, particularly from a financial standpoint. As an aside, the largest raise I ever got was when my children moved into kindergarten. I chose family childcare very intentionally for myself and my children and my family because it was the right choice for us. And so I've seen firsthand how much trust and partnership it takes to leave your children in someone else's hands, and how deeply these educators are providing, not just education for the children, but nurturing for the families as a whole. So if I think about then pairing that with my professional experiences, where again, I have seen, just the incredible quality of educators and all that they bring to their profession, but how also underfunded and undervalued they are. This is really personal for me. I don't see family childcare as a stopgap. It is a critical underpinning and cornerstone of quality early childhood education in our system. And my personal and professional experiences help me carry that belief into every conversation I have and every space that I exist in.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It is truly beautiful also to witness beyond the interplay between the personal and the professional, but this intergenerational dynamic, right, that is ever present in each of your stories, as well as the moments where there was very real tension and a disconnect between what you were experiencing and also what you were experiencing personally, and what the systems that you were engaging in were either communicating to you or how they were meeting the need that you experienced. And over the course of this conversation, it is our goal that we are here to reimagine, to build together what educators are worthy of receiving, engaging, and also experiencing as a result of the important work that they do every single day on behalf of young children and families. And we are really endeavoring to have this conversation with a lot of curiosity, accountability, and also to be bold in asking some questions that perhaps may not have been asked previously. And so in that endeavor, I am curious to hear from you, Erica. Where do you see are some of the spaces where there is fragmentation or misalignment in policy in a way that it gets in the way of supporting family child care effectively?
Thank you, Lucy. So I think this is an interesting question, and I want to sort of address it by sort of starting out with the positive, and where are some places where there is good alignment, and then absolutely follow up with some of the challenges that we're seeing. But just to jump to the the recommendation or what we think really supports alignment is connecting between what family and child care educators say they want and need and the decisions that are being made. Time and time again, we hear of that mismatch, and in places where there are strong voices for family child care educators, we've been able to address that, to see that addressed or removed before it becomes an issue. So a couple of places where we see that misalignment. The first is that I want to talk about is the need for inclusion of family child care in programs like public pre-kindergarten or in universal child care places. When we're talking about the child care, early care and education systems, we have to include family child care. In some places where family child care was not included, that had a negative impact, of course, on the family child care programs, but really on the entire early care and education ecosystem. I won't go into the details, but the business model for child care programs, both family child care as well as child care centers, it's very tenuous. And so when changes are made that impact the types of children that they care for, the amounts of money that they might have available, it could actually make them close, which then hurts your ability to provide the other types of care, whether that's care for infants and toddlers or care during those off hours. And so one place where there's a significant need for alignment is to make sure that in those large efforts to get a lot of families access to care, children access to early learning, that family child care has to be a part of it. Another one, just to quickly go into it, is really working to bring together our different childcare systems to make it easier for family childcare business owners. It's very important. The identity as a business owner is very important for those of us in family childcare. However, in interacting with different programs, there are a lot of burdensome rules, confusing information, and that can make it very difficult for somebody to run their business. I was talking with a family child care educator who participates in her state subsidy program and other initiatives in her state. She's in the state of Washington. And in 1 year, she received 8 different 1099s from the same state. She needed a forensic accountant to put together her taxes at the end of the year. So as much as we can do to streamline the processes for family childcare, that makes it easier for them to focus on both running a strong business, but more importantly, on the children and families in their program.
Thank you so much, Erica, right? And I really want to underscore, right, this intentionality around an integration that is both meaningful and purposeful for family child care, business owners and providers to be able to be part of a system that meets the needs of children and families, right? The fact that it takes into account the expressed desires and also preferences of those individuals, both from the educators that are working and running family child care businesses and also from families and the choices that they're making. And then this sense around how to make this as this burden as light as possible so that it doesn't get in the way of the important work that is at hand. I'm curious to hear from you, Sarah. In what ways do current funding structures perhaps help or hinder this sustainability that we are talking about, right? The relationship-based coaching in family child care and the supports that we know family child care providers have vocalized as needing and also as being instrumental to the work that they carry out every day.
Well, I think this is such a critical question. And the key word that I want to hone in on is the word sustaining, because I think in my community, and I know lots of communities, identifying consistent, sustainable funding pathways is, one of the number one, if not, the biggest challenge to building and supporting family childcare educators in a network in our communities. So when it's done well, I think there are communities that have braided together really intentionally public and philanthropic dollars. And that intentionality around braiding those funding streams together allows for investment in relationship-based coaching and meeting providers where they are and delivering to them all of the supports and services that they need to drive, their success as business owners and to drive quality. But when the funding is unstable, when priorities shift, when the subsidies aren't high enough, it's flash in the pan funding, or just administrative burdens, then programs are going to have a really hard time, keeping experienced coaches, maintaining consistent relationships with providers, and doing the work that they need to do. The work of coaching is rooted in trust, and trust requires a certain amount of steadiness, and that instability really undermines both trust and impact. And so, I can only speak from, kind of a philanthropic standpoint, but I think in the philanthropic space, we historically have not quite understood what an opportunity there is for us to make in family childcare education and in family childcare educators. I think that that's shifting, but funders can play a really critical role here. The work that we can do can help pilot new approaches, pilot, new innovations. We can provide, some stopgap funding or continuity when public funding shifts. And we can also help advocate for systems level change in funding, so that we are all investing in childcare as essential infrastructure. And so I think when done well, philanthropy's role can be to help show people what's possible when we invest in family childcare and the impact that it can have.
I love that. I love the illustration, right, of what is possible and the intentionality that goes into it, because we know that there is so much value in the steadiness that you just mentioned, Sarah. And I think particularly given our current times and given how it often feels as if that level of intentionality and that fidelity of honoring what we hear from the field and what we hear from individuals that do this work, and also meeting that need, may feel like an afterthought because there's so many pressing and time-sensitive things that are happening. Yet we recognize that the work must still happen. And so I'm curious to hear from you, Jessica, based on where you sit and the impactful work that you lead through All Our Kin, what do you see as some of the most urgent systems level changes that are needed to support family child care and those who coach them? And how does that then weave in some of the things that both Sarah and Erica mentioned, and particularly, I think, the spaces where that kind of innovation and that kind of steadiness that Sarah mentions can be made explicit?
Yeah, such a great question. So first, let me say, I think we're at a really important moment, and I want everyone on this call to think about what this moment means and what their role is right now. It's a moment of huge challenge. We know that educators are leaving the field. We know that programs are closing. We know that parents are struggling and that educators aren't being paid enough. At the same time, it's a moment of opportunity. It's a moment when parents are standing up and saying, I need to be able to afford childcare. I need my childcare program to stay open. We're hearing from folks across the country how important childcare is to them. We're hearing from funders, from business people, from policymakers, from families, and most important, we are hearing from educators themselves. We have educator leaders of tremendous power. And so now is the moment to say what it is we need systems to look like. So the first thing we have to say, we just have to say, educators need to feel seen, right? Through the pandemic and beyond, educators have done so much to hold families together, to lift up and care for children, and they've been ignored and overlooked, except when it's convenient and important to talk about the work that they do. And if we're really being honest, we don't value children all that much either. And we need to start valuing and lifting up children. That also means that we need to pay for childcare. You know, sometimes we tell this story about like educators do this work for love, not money. It's got to be love and money. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous to ask people to forego wages in order to take care of children and do this work that's so important. And so I think really it comes down to a lot of what we heard from my fellow panelists. States are building out systems like universal childcare, and family childcare has to be part of that for so many reasons. The way that's going to happen is through what we at All Our Kin call staffed family childcare networks. And the reason I say we at All Our Kin is people mean a lot of different things when they say that. And what we mean is a community that is driven by educator voice, that is responsive to educator and family needs, that delivers holistic support around education and business training, and is rooted in relationships and respect. And this is where the role of the coach comes in. None of us can do our work alone. And this is especially true in the care of children. To have a coach by your side who can support you in caring for children, who can bring you in connection with your peers to advocate on the issues that are most important to you, and who can make sure that you're accessing all the resources available in your community, that's essential. Often those networks get started, this is what we do at All Our Kin, through catalytic funding from folks like Greenlight. But the goal is that government is going to take up supporting and funding those networks and incorporating coaching into part of it. And that government will also incorporate the principles of coaching into the way they interact with educators, which far too often is punitive and adversarial and frankly unhelpful to everyone in the system. So I would say there are kind of three big things to say about how to approach educators. The first is genuinely valuing educator leadership and make sure that in structuring your networks, your systems, your funding mechanisms, you're listening to what educators tell you is going to work for them. The second is support, not compliance. I'm not saying there's not a role for oversight, for health and safety. Of course there is. But the systems of support that you build for educators, those need to be trusting relationships and partnerships, not places for checklists and for judgments. Those functions really need to be separate. And then the last thing has to be walking in the door every time with respect for the hard work that educators do, and really thinking about how it is that what you are bringing in is making their lives better and making the lives of children and families better. And I'm just going to tell a really quick story, and Marina's going to be mad at me because it's a story about her, so she's going to get embarrassed. But Marina, as you know, was a coach for All Our Kin for many years. And I will never forget a story that Marina told me about a child, not unlike my brother, who had so many challenges. He was a little boy, and Marina was coaching an educator who was at her wit's end. So many programs had turned this child away. And this educator said, I just don't think I can do it. I don't know how I can do it. And Marina sat down, and together they found a place of love and skill and intention that enabled that educator to keep and care for that child and help them change some of those really hard behaviors. Let's just think for a minute of what that meant for that child throughout their life, for their family, for all the systems that we turn to fix a child as though they're broken when we could invest in them in the beginning. That's the power of family childcare with coaching, with funding and support to actually change the whole trajectory of a child's life.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for that. It's such an impactful response and also an illustration through the story that you just shared, right? And what I am hearing central through all of your responses, and something that I think is really key for all of us to walk away with, is how are we navigating and really centering relationships that we are both responsive to and accountable for, right? What does it look like to exist in this community that honors the expertise and the talents and the many gifts that everyone brings to the table, and also the understanding that not one single person alone will be able to navigate through this, but that together we really are able to be more responsive, more cohesive, and more supportive in sustaining a system that we know is so deeply necessary, not just for the educators, but again, for children and families across communities. And so I am so thankful for that, because I think that there is also a lot around relationships that evokes questions around equity, around power, around mutuality and reciprocity. And I'd love to turn it over to Marina to dig a little bit deeper around what does that look like in practice, especially again, given many competing priorities where those things seem to be the first things that go out the window when we are trying to be in relationship with one another. Marina.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you all. Oh my goodness, I'm feeling really inspired by this conversation, and some of it, not some of it, a lot of it, most of it feels so true to the experience I've had working so close with family childcare. And the way that you spoke, the way that you've shown up today too, also reminds me about the power of collaboration. The importance of dignity. How do we move through elevating and centering dignity, and also thinking about power and who holds it? So all of us on this on the panel are connected. We've collaborated and worked alongside each other in our shared purpose. And if you ask me, I'd say we do partnership really well. And yet I also want to help us to deepen the conversation about what partnership really means. And when does equity and accountability, when is equity and accountability centered? So how do we move beyond collaboration as practice into collaboration as responsibility to one another, to our communities, and to the values that we uphold? And so this question is for all of you. How do you currently build and sustain partnerships with educators that, as Lucy said earlier, are reciprocal rather than extracting? And I'll let any of you take that one on. We'd like to hear from all of you on that.
I'm happy to jump in on this. I think a lot about this, and I think I'm in a unique place where when we talk about building and sustaining partnerships with educators that are reciprocal rather than extracting, I have the privilege that the family childcare educators lead our organization. They are the decision makers. They are highly represented on our board of directors, people who are currently in their family childcare program. And so every day of my work is that partnering piece. So we have a lot of thoughts and recommendations on how to do this partnership piece. And I would say the first piece of it is really shifting the perspective around family childcare. Family childcare is incredibly versatile. Family childcare educators are very savvy. I often refer to them as the Swiss Army knife of ECE, because a family childcare educator can do the educational component, running a business component, working with families, working with the community. And because of that, they're very powerful in your shared goals. And I think if you entered in not with a view of extraction or as a savior, but really that there is a lot of expertise and skills and value that family child care bring to the work that we're doing on a really high level. I think that is one important shift that I would encourage people to make. The second one, and we have a whole report about this. We wrote a report around family child care leadership a couple of years ago, and we'll drop that in the chat or share that with you, however we can do that. But there were 6 ideas that we put in that report around partnering and really lifting up the leadership of family child care. And I will just briefly list off what they are. The first was understanding and building on existing family child care programs and leadership. The second is to make capacity building and funding available for family child care-led associations and peer networks. The third is to offer leadership development and opportunities and encourage participation in professional associations. The fourth is to include family child care-led organizations in ECE systems building and beyond. And the sixth, I think I messed my numbering a little bit, but the sixth is to build a big tent, that family child care-led organizations should be inclusive of all home-based childcare and to be in partnership with other similar grassroots organizations. So we'll share that there. If you want to learn more, please look at joining or participating in NAFCC. We think a lot about deeply partnering with educators across all of the different programs and services at NAFCC.
Thank you for that, Erica. That was helping me think about the it's amazing work, right? Just the opportunity to not just lift, but really center educators' own potential. And it made me think about the Hartford Family Child Care Educators community that, as we know, and you know them well, Erica, because I know that Maria Amara, who helps to lead the community, went through the Shaping Leaders at NAFC, and we really supported her to not just center her voice and her values and the way that she was experiencing what the resources that she thought were available or not in her community, but just really hold space for her as she continued to unfold into this organic leader that was already in her. And we did that through the power of our coaching relationship and to really lend our resources. So that was just what was coming up for me as I was hearing those, your report. Are they suggestions? I forgot how you framed the report.
Ideas.
Ideas.
So we shared them as ideas for lifting up family child care leadership.
Ideas. Powerful ideas, I'd say. Yes. Erica or Sarah?
I'm happy to share a little bit. So I think, reciprocity for us in the philanthropic space starts with listening, but then quickly needs to move into the creation of spaces where educators are in leadership roles and shaping the agenda and co-creation. I think a critical part of that is acknowledging their expertise. We spent a lot of time today, I think, talking about how educators are experts, and that's amazing that we're doing that in this space. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case in many spaces. Often we hear from educators that when they are engaged, it is because someone's looking for data or compliance or like to check off a box. And so we really need to build spaces for true co-creation where their expertise is acknowledged and not just acknowledged, but compensated, include them meaningfully in decision-making, and then that we are sharing back the results of their input and creating these kind of ongoing feedback loops where we're creating together, iterating, and evolving.
And I'll just add, I've had the great honor and pleasure of partnering with both of you. And Sarah, I know one of the reasons all our kin resonated with Greenlight was that stance of listening. Erica, I know we have partnered so much around educator leadership, and NAFCC has done so much to elevate educator voice. I think for us, our work always begins on the ground, right? And so it starts when you walk in the door of someone's home and respecting the fact that you're walking into someone's home, sitting down at the table and having a cup of tea and saying, what is it you need from our organization? We're not here to tell you what to do. We want to know how we can serve you in your work, and to have that attitude in everything that we offer, to shape our programs in response to what we hear from educators, to shape our organizational structure in what we hear from educators, to decide where we're going to expand in response to what we hear from educators. And there's another piece to this too, which is we started with the work on the ground. And we realized that to move a true mission of equity forward, we also had to be working to actively create spaces where educators could advocate, and to focus on policy change and systems level change so that educator voice is included, not just in shaping all our kin, but in shaping the systems around us, the water that we're swimming in. And one of the things I'm most excited about is that we are increasingly partnering, not just in our own work in Connecticut and New York City, but in many of our partnerships across the country with groups that are educator-led, and where it really is educators like Maria Amato in Hartford who are shaping everything about that network design and leading that work forward in every possible way. And I'll just say one more thing about this, which is educators work so hard every day, all day long. And we talk about educator leadership a lot. We need to fund educator leadership and recognize that that too is labor, and that educators are paid for the time that they are spending as mentors, as coaches, and as advocates for themselves and their sisters.
Yes, yes to all of that. Yes. I'm not sure, Lucy, if anything's resonating with you from this conversation or if you had thoughts to share. But I'd like to invite your voice.
I think this last point around leadership that Jessica just made really resonated with me, right? You saw me snapping my fingers just as a way of echoing and signaling how much it's resonating. And I think that this is evidence in all of the responses that have been shared today. There is time that goes in each of these conversations, into the thoughtfulness, right, of creating systems and creating partnerships and relationships that are not extractive. And so it is incredibly important to be able to honor the fact that people are taking time to be present, that there is a wealth of expertise and experience that individuals bring. And so when we invite individuals to be in community with us, to co-create and to build out new systems, new ways of engaging with one another, that we are thinking about what does that mean in an equitable manner, right? The fact that for certain individuals, the work of bringing people together, of gathering folks into community with one another is their job, right? That is their livelihood, that is their bread and butter. And so that means that they're receiving some kind of compensation, some kind of remuneration for it. How is that also then honored for those that you are inviting in, right? What does it look like to really acknowledge the fact that someone is able to speak eloquently and passionately about something because they've amassed the experience to be able to offer that lens, and that listening sessions where there is no kind of circling back, right? Where there is no kind of follow through or follow up on what happened with the information that you shared. What is the results of the time that we spent together is extractive, right? Because it doesn't allow individuals and it doesn't create opportunities Prince Aurelius to follow the journey alongside you, right? And it really is something that I think many of us have to be very mindful of, especially as we are doing the work of engaging educators, particularly in this moment in time, to elevate their voices and uplift their experiences, but also to honor what it means to add one more thing to their plate, which is advocacy, right? Which is to add one more thing, which is to elevate voices. How do we create reciprocity? And reciprocity is not singularly through a gift card or through compensation. Yes, it is necessary, but it's also ownership, right? It is through consent of what happens with what is shared and with the stories that are being told, what happens with the narratives that are being shaped and the perception that are being created. And so I think all of those pieces are ways that we all have to be very mindful. And I'm extremely thankful for each of the panelists for illustrating opportunities and vehicles and mechanisms that you employ in order to make that visible and real and tangible, whether it is through the research that you're shaping, the communities that you are forming, the investigation that you're doing, the listening, right, to be able to best meet each of the educators where they are. There is a way to be able to do this that really honors the reciprocity that exists amongst us, and that really lays to bear the fact that we have to be good tenders to one another in service to the work that we are producing, and that starts with how we engage with one another, that then we hope will be replicated in the systems that we become a part of. So excited to have been part of this conversation, and I'll turn it over to you, Marina, so that you can close us out.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a few questions in the Q&A that I'm gonna pull from. Andrea asked us, I think we'll probably have one, we'll have time for like maybe 1 or 2 questions. But just as a reminder, we are creating a resource document, and we'll gather some information to include in that big resource document that will answer your questions to the best of our ability. And we will also share resources like the one Erica mentioned in a follow-up email you will all get. But we have a question from Andrea, and she asks, federal funding is instability. Federal funding instability has affected the trust of the coaching relationship with providers. How can we mitigate some of the insecurity that brings to our relationships? How does that land for you? And it also makes me think about this idea of hope, and like, if you had no constraints, political, financial, or bureaucratic, like how would you radically support, create a supportive system? What would that look like for you?
I'm smiling because, Marina, I think you'd be one of the best people to answer that question about how to develop trust, or how to maintain the trust in those relationships. I think the first is naming the instability, that insecurity, and just connecting on a human level between, the coach and the family child care educator. We're all facing and feeling a lot of the same things, but to name it, to highlight that the individual health and well-being of the provider, of the educator themselves is important, because sometimes I think when we're in this work of care and educating others, we lose ourselves and our own humanity, our own need for sustainability. And I think doing those 2 things can build back that relationship. And continuing to do advocacy, maybe support that family child care educator in taking the next step. And if they're feeling some challenges because of the changes that are happening, hey, can we help you write a letter about that? Can we help you advocate for changes that will make this situation better? So there's no magic answer here, but just continuing to connect as a person and giving outlets for, how do we move ahead during some of these really challenging times.
Yes, thank you. I agree with all of that. Jess or Sarah, as we wrap up?
Yeah, I would just add, now is the time for state government to step up wherever it can. Now is the time for philanthropy to step up wherever it can. Shout out to you, Sarah, for doing that yourself. And so I think I would love for us all to be thinking together as advocates. If we can't move the needle on federal funding, where are there other places that we could get that support? And not just childcare, right? Department of Labor, workforce money, money for children's health. What we do is part of all those things. And I think we really have to push for folks across sectors to think about what it means to support childcare right now.
Yeah.
I would just add to that. I think a lot of the things we talked about today sound really bold, and they are. And I think we can also get a little anxious and nervous when things sound bold and ambitious, and we can let the enemy of good be perfect. And so, what I am trying to focus on right now, what I am trying to encourage the folks that I come into contact with in my team is. We can't wait for the perfect conditions. And so we need to figure out where we can move the needle, where we can make investments, where we can be flexible and make things happen, because every single step that we're taking moves us towards this system that values family childcare as the critical part of our infrastructure that it is, and moves us towards really thinking about how we take care of children and families holistically. And so small steps matter, and every small step helps us to those bigger steps.
Ooh, yes, I don't know that I can add anything else to what a powerful conversation we just had. So thank you all for taking time from your busy lives doing this incredible work that really uplifts family childcare educator as the entrepreneurs that they are, as the care and care providers and educators that they are, as the holders of families and communities and real beacons in their areas. I'm grateful and fortunate to have been in your presence. And I thank you all, and I know that life will continue to bring us together. So I know this is not our last time together, but I hope that everybody here that was listening and that joined us today was able to get something from this conversation that they can go back to their communities with. And so many thank yous for sharing your insights, points of views, expertise, kindness, generosity. May you always have good health. May you always be protected so that you can continue to do this work and continue to serve as a guiding post in this work of women that far too long has been undervalued and underserved. And it's a true honor to have served also as co-moderator with Lucy. Lucy, thank you for your guidance in this conversation. And a big shout out to the teams that helped to produce this, our phenomenal colleagues at All Our Kin. I'm not gonna name names because I'll probably leave some out. So just a huge love for everything that you did to bring us together today. And certainly our partnership with Trust for Learning. And I would be remiss if I didn't name our Juanita and her the interpretation team at Integrated Languages. Thank you all, and definitely until next